All right, welcome to today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast. We've got a very interesting one for you today. We're going to talk a lot about robotic mowers. We've got Husqvarna on the podcast, and we've got, would you like to introduce yourself, Andrew, your role, what you're doing, and we'll get into some of the more interesting and fascinating and probably one of the more controversial subjects in the industry right now, which is robotics. So introduce yourself, let us know what you do, what your title is, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. So my name's Andrew Murison. I'm the Business Development Manager for Robotics for Husqvarna. I've been with the company about 3.5 years, and in that time I've seen a lot of change, particularly with robotic mowing. But I started as a robotic sales specialist, so out in the field, installing and quoting robotic lawnmowers. There's been a lot of change in that 3.5 years with the technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit about myself.
And I feel like you're the perfect person then to have this conversation, because you know that there's the classic debate between the engineer and the mechanic in the car world. You know, the engineer designs the car and then the mechanic goes out and works on it and just goes, what the hell are you doing here? You know, and you kind of have a little bit of, now that you're in the business development, but you were the mechanic that was out in the field. You were the guy who was there, I guess, in a sense, not literally a mechanic, but they're talking to people, selling stuff, having those conversations. So probably this is going to be a walk in the park for you, because this is going to be like the same thing you did for 3.5 years or 3 years or whatever, just on camera. Now, let's get straight into the robotics side, because why are you stealing all of our jobs?
I'm glad you touched on that, because that's actually one of the things we see changing. So when I first started the role, a lot of people were hesitant about adopting this technology because they saw it as a threat to their jobs, particularly contractors. But now a lot of these companies are actually coming to us saying, we're finding it hard to find quality staff. To actually keep up with the work that they've got. So they actually can see it as a value add for their business, and it essentially can free up time for the value add activities that their clients want. So they might be able to spend more time blowing down the paths or spending extra time doing the hedging and making, high profile areas look really nice for their clients. So that's been a pretty refreshing change in the industry from mine.
Yeah, I'm that's exactly my story. About 7-8 years ago, the local mower shop that I was at, and I've been in business for 10 years, right? So, and I've been a gardener for much longer than that. So the local mower shop started selling these robotic mowers, and I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that, right? Because, but then I started really thinking about it, and I don't think, there's a few things, we'll get into some of this stuff, but yes, there's two sides of it. One is that there's a human element to some work where people want a human being there. Okay, well, we'll talk about that later. But the second thing is that the market has changed from 7-8 years ago, and it was always hard to find good staff. But I've talked about this so many times with people on the podcast, small business owners, people who manage golf courses or whatever it is, and finding staff is the hardest thing in this industry. And if you can have a tool that helps you get through your work, all of a sudden it becomes, this is a creative option to come up with a solution that is one of the most difficult things to solve in the industry right now. And I feel like there's going to be a tipping point with the industry, because there's so much new technology coming out. We're going to talk about your EPOS system and things like that. People, so get excited, because that's all coming up soon. But there's so much new technology that it makes this a realistic option for a contractor to use for the sites that they have. And what I found with, I'm waffling a lot here. What I have found with the market is that any creative solution, instead of it, what I've seen is people will gravitate towards a business that is coming up with those creative solutions and able to deliver higher quality results. So if you had, say, someone's going to mow the lawn for 60 grand a year at a site and do a couple of extras, but you're going to, mow it for, let's say, the cost of the machine, right? So let's say it's $20,000 or whatever it is. And I know that there's a range, but then you do 40,000 of add-ons. I found a lot of businesses, they would do the 60 grand if they got it in their budget because they want return. So there's this option where it's like, oh, hold on a second. The budget doesn't change for those places. They still want it looking great. And so you're coming in with this competitive advantage. That was a lot of waffling, but I guess that's kind of where you're coming from too, right?
Yeah, look, a lot of the big contractors we talk about, when they're tendering for work, they actually get asked for an innovation. And a lot of them are looking at robotic mowing now. Obviously, there's a lot of benefits outside of just reducing their operational cost
Yep.
of doing the mowing, particularly coming out of COVID, a lot of people working from home.
Yep.
There's a lot of noise complaints and things with a traditional ride-on mower. So, a robotic lawnmower, it's about the same noise as a fridge. So, 52 to 56 dBA. So, and no chance of rocks or sticks being launched into people or cars. So yeah, there's some real tangible benefits there.
People, if you've been enjoying this Makers Month series, we're in the second half of it now. If you've been loving that, the reality is that has only been able to happen or been able to be produced because of the Patreons. You may not know this, but the work that goes behind the scenes is insane. We've been doing sort of 11 p.m., 12 p.m. finishes pretty much every day since this series started, and a little bit before that, to be honest, as well. And here's the thing, I'm not editing these podcasts at all. We have an editor now. So it's just a sheer amount of work. If you're enjoying this and you've been listening to them, we're not getting paid by the brands. This is trying to be as unbiased as possible. And so people, if you like this series, jump on the Patreon. We need that support because at the end of the series, there won't be anything left, any money left. So going forward, we need some of that support. So people, jump on if you're enjoying it. Become a patron. You become $5 a month, or you can give $5 a month, or $16.50. Now, if you say that's not within my means, totally fine. No judgment, no pressure. But if it's within your means and you are enjoying it, then go for that. Now, a way that you can support without the money is to share on social media. Help us get more people who listen, more people who watch. And anyways, I want to say thank you to those patrons because honestly, I can't handle too many more of these late nights. So thanks for supporting and paying for that editor. Anyways, let's get back in the podcast. Let's get into your lineup. I'm just going to put this on the screen here. So it's telling me there's 25 different options available from Husqvarna. Is that a couple of double ups depending on which layout you get or whatever? Or is that about what you've got?
Well, look, I guess it probably originates from the fact we've been manufacturing robotic mowers since 1995. So we've got a huge range. So we cover small lawns from 400 square meters right up into the commercial range of up to 75,000 square meters. But we've designed products specific to people's needs. So, for example, you might have a lawn that's got really steep slopes, so they might need an all-wheel drive that can handle up to 35 degrees. Someone might just have a 200 square meter flat lawn, so they don't need an auto mower with all the bells and whistles. They can just go for one of the entry-level products.
You said 75,000 square meters before. Let's not brush over that. Let's start with these guys. Now, I've got them enlisted in price order, and because these Cioras is the name of them, they are so fancy that they don't even have a price. They're free, people. You can go get. No, that's not the case. You gotta get a quote. Is what the idea is. But I will just go through the prices. But we're going to start with what is your most expensive. What are the ballpark prices for these Cioras? You said up to 75,000 square meters. It's a little bit more than I've got here in my small backyard.
Yes.
So what are the price ballpark on these ones?
Look, 50 to 55,000 is
Hmm.
it would be in the ballpark. It just obviously depends what options
Hmm.
you select for the mower. But yeah, there is a slight installation cost as well if you have Husqvarna or a Husqvarna dealer come out and actually install it for you. But in that price, we've actually um, covered the customer for 2 years with two
Right.
years warranty and built-in servicing into that price. So the customers fully looked after for 2 years, and if they wanted additional service, that's something we would charge for on top.
So you've got the 544 and the 546. I've
Yep,
clicked on the 544 for those who are listening, and most people are just listening. But
yep,
I'm going to try and describe it now. I should ask you just very briefly, what is the difference between the two? Because they look very very similar.
yeah. They're actually identical in size. It's
Hmm.
basically the 544's slower across the turf.
Hmm.
It mows up to 1,350 square meters an hour, and the
Yeah, it's pretty
five,
quick.
yeah, 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 and the 546 is up to 1,800 square meters an hour. So obviously it gets across the ground a lot quicker.
So does that have a bigger capacity then, or is it? Yeah, so it does. So basically, it sounds like the slower moving one would be one that if you had faster growing turf, or you just needed it to spend a little bit more time, maybe.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So okay, and let's. I'm going to click this photo because this looks fascinating. There's three. I'm going to try and describe it for people. The mower
yeah,
itself actually bends up, so it's kind of like it's got a pivot point in the middle.
yeah.
And
So you can actually
mhm,
release a latch, and the deck sits on two rollers,
yep,
and you can fold it up. And the reason you do that would be for maintenance. So you can
yeah, of
tell it to
course.
drive to the maintenance point where you might have a hose, there's the garden hose, and you can clean the deck out and do basic maintenance on it and clean the blades or change the blades, I should say.
Yeah, of course. So there's three, what you typically call, I guess, a spindle, a blade carrier.
Um,
So yeah, cutting mechanisms essentially, people. So now,
Yes. So those silver plates that you see there, they're actually a skid plate. Yeah, if
mm-hmm.
you zoom in, what
What
the skid
what
plate
have I done?
does.
I clicked the wrong photo. Oh, we always have technical difficulties on here. All right,
There
I
we
fixed it. Sorry.
go. Yeah,
What are you
that's all
saying?
right. So if you those skid plates, they're actually designed to protect the blades. So if it was to
Mm-hmm.
run over something on the lawn, the blades don't run into it. They're protected by that skid plate. But
Right.
they also have a second benefit, and that's to prevent scalping. So
Yep.
if they go over a curved or uneven area of grass, the
Mm-hmm.
blades won't actually dig in. So, and the blades actually sit on a backing pad
Mm-hmm.
underneath that skid plate.
Now they're very small little razor blades. I zoomed in on them before. I think people understand
Mm,
that concept with robotic mowers in general.
yeah,
They're not literally like razor blades you buy off the shelf, but it's that kind of concept, right? How long do these blades last in terms of, let's say you're doing, yeah, I guess it depends on how much lawn you're cutting, right? But let's say you're cutting a hectare every day with this machine, right?
yeah.
Uh, and it's fairly thick. It's fairly long. Is it every couple of weeks you need to replace it? Is it once a year? What's the
Yeah.
range of
Look,
realistic? You know.
yeah, look, the guideline would be every 3 to 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
In peak season for a residential auto mower
Mm-hmm.
for an area that size. For a larger commercial machine like this Ciora, the customer would inspect it weekly just to have a quick look at it. If it's on a really fast growing turf, they're probably every 3 to 4 weeks looking at changing the blades on it. But it's a very simple process. You just Phillips head screwdriver and take the screw out and put a new one in.
Right. And what are these blades made out of? Obviously metal, but is there
Yeah,
a specific hardened metal, stainless steel, or jazz?
yeah. I like to say special Swedish steel, but it's actually high speed carbon steel. But they're designed to be shatterproof. and tested for that. So they are a very durable blade. And we've actually launched lots of different blades. Some of them can last a lot longer as well
Hmm.
because they have a higher HRC rating, so up to HRC 63, which makes them very durable.
Right. So what would happen hypothetically if you were to spend $55,000 on a robotic mower and then cheap out on 50-cent razor blades?
Yeah,
Because
look,
someone might try that at some point. You know what I mean? People are
yeah,
dumb.
look, we obviously wouldn't recommend OEM blades for the product. But we actually provide the customer with obviously blades on the machine,
Hmm.
and then they actually get a 45 pack as well supplied with the machine.
A 45 pack. How
Mm,
many is there?
yeah.
Two on each? Three, four?
So each cutting pad has 5 blades, so you got 15 in
Okay.
total
Yep.
on a Sierra machine. And yeah, look, obviously, I mentioned before 2 years worth of servicing. We've actually built blades into the price of it, so you've
Okay.
actually got free blades for 2 years essentially.
Gee, that's pretty good. Well, what do they cost after that? Because it's kind of weird because you would think they're not very big.
Yeah,
They wouldn't be
it
expensive.
varies. It varies depending on the blade, but I'd say about $2.50.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
Pretty standard.
Yeah, I mean, but I was thinking like because one of those things is they're not very big, yeah, but then also you have these economies of scale, right? Because people they're not super common, so I don't know if they're interchangeable on other Husqvarna mowers or whatever. But anyway, interesting. There you go. It's nothing really. If you're spending $50,000 on a machine
Mm,
to cost you what $2.50 each, you reckon? 15 was it 40
yeah.
$35, something like that, in
Mm.
that range. That's cheaper than replacing blades on a $50,000 ride-on lawnmower. Now,
Yeah, well, if you comparing the blades to like a equivalent sort of cut, which essentially is a cylinder mower,
mhm,
they're very expensive to sharpen and replace.
for sure. What's the cut width on this?
It's 76 centimeters, so it's not a huge cut width, but having the three cutting motors obviously makes it much larger than a standard auto mower, and they cut systematically in patterns, so they're much more efficient in how they cut.
Hmm.
But they've designed that for a reason. So if you look under the deck there, quite they're quite a long way from the
Yes,
edges from a safety
huge.
perspective.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah. So the whole idea, because it does it in its own time, it's not as important to have such a large deck.
I want to ask you some dumb questions because these are what
Yeah.
happens, right? So I'll move on to this picture here. I told you I was thinking about this when I was doing some work this morning for the podcast. Here's what happens: people will get a lovely. You got on screen for you. I've got a lovely picture of this mower. It's cutting some beautiful grass, nice, location, and nice locations often have lakes, or they have some other form of water, a little creek, a little
Yep.
pond, something like that. And nice locations, if they're public locations, also have delinquents, children, drunk people. Has anybody ever picked up one of these and thrown it into a pond or something? Let's say it's mowing at night because you want it quiet and a drunk guy is having a laugh, coming out of a party. And if that was to happen, right, two questions. I don't know if you even know the answer to this. One, do they float? Because that would be great if they did, because you could just scoop it out with your bull thing. And two, how waterproof are they? Because I know they can mow in the rain and I know they can handle that sort of
Mm.
wetness. But if they are thrown in a lake, right, is
Mm.
that going to be a problem?
Well, look, I personally haven't seen an auto mower thrown into a lake. Normally, in a public space, the security's so high that if you pick it up, the alarm goes off
Yep. Okay.
straight away. So it's normally enough of a deterrent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I do get where you're coming from. I have seen, because we came out of some really unusual rainfall over the last 3 years.
Yep.
We did have some on commercial sites where the mowers went, 1.5 meters underwater,
Oh
okay, at a
wow,
time
from a flood.
from flooding, and that mower was actually salvageable. Just seals and breathers were changed on it. Look, they're not designed to go completely underwater.
Yep.
They will float for a period of time, but if they're left too long, and obviously it's dependent on the model, but yeah, they're not designed to be underwater for lengthy periods, but they have very good seals in them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, look, coming back to, people being rat bags, it can happen anywhere, but the good thing is if people are tampering with the product, you can actually track that.
Yeah, yeah.
So the mower's got lift and tilt sensors on it, so you can get a notification straight away that someone's playing with the mower. So at least you can actually try and do something about it.
Well, I think from a money standpoint, people would have these insured, right? And that would be clearly
Mm,
a case you could get your insurance to pay out for. But I think more from a practical standpoint, if you were to like base your business on these mowers and you like, let's say you didn't even have a ride-on lawnmower and someone threw
mm,
it in the lake and then it's like, let's say it's salvageable, which is
mm,
fantastic if it is, say it spends the
mm,
whole weekend under there and you can fix it up. It takes 2 weeks to fix it. It's like, well, what am I going to do for 2 weeks? So, but that's a
mm.
very rare scenario. I'm not suggesting that people,
Yeah,
every weekend this is going to
yeah,
happen, but people who are going to spend the money, they want to know that, especially if like, because I've done plenty of retirement villages over the years and they always have some sort of water feature, or they often do, almost always have a pond or something. And you never know. If
mm,
Granny's had a couple of rosés, she might get out there, and get a bit, be a bit of a rat bag, like you said.
yeah. Look, in terms of the actual accuracy on these newer commercial models, they're as accurate to 2 centimeters when they're on the lawn. So it's very unlikely that they're going to drive themselves in there. Um, but yeah, you never say never. Someone could do that, but yeah, it's very rare. Occasionally people will try and take them, but they've got theft tracking in them, most of the models.
Mm-hmm.
And normally what happens is if people go onto a property and steal things that aren't bolted down, they take the auto mower. Normally the owner's able to track where it is and they recover it.
That's actually like almost an incentive to buy one. If you're getting a lot of things
Mm,
stolen, well, you've got
mm,
GPS tracker anyway.
yeah,
One thing we haven't talked about is these do not use wires. These
yeah,
models here,
correct.
and this is one of the things that I think has turned a lot of people off the robotic mowers in the past. Is
Yeah,
the I'll tell you a story. I did I've told this on the podcast, but recently we work at a private school, one of our contracts, and this school has had immense irrigation issues for a long, long time. We've been fixing and fixing and
mm,
fixing. We got to a point where it was like just about right, like just about good. And then a landscaping contractor needed to put some paving in and cut through my wires, right?
mm,
And 500 square meters of lawn just died. Like last week was the hottest spring week, I think, ever in Perth history. It was like 35, 35, 38, 37, 39. Like it was crazy.
mm,
Really hot and just roasted everything. Anyways, people get worried about that because it is easy to, especially on a site you're not there 24/7, somebody comes in, they cut a wire, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, hold on a second, here's these advantages here, or people don't want to dig up, their lawn, or they're worried about having to. How do you get it under a drive or across a driveway? You got to run wires there, So this is a really interesting um, ability. Is there a limitation to it though, in terms of like, can you run it over paths to different sections? Is there a distance you can't do that for? So I'm thinking, like in this photo here, you've got it cutting.
mm,
I'm describing this to people who are listening. We've got the internal soccer field of an athletics track, and then we've got like a training pitch over here. Is it
yeah,
possible to run it so that it goes through a certain route to get up to the second track there? Is there
yeah.
limitations with how far that can go? Like an aged care facility that might be 500 meters away or something like that.
Yeah, so the mower actually uses RTK GNSS technology,
I've got
which is
no idea
essentially,
what that means. So can you
yeah,
explain that to me?
well, it stands for real time kinetics and global navigation system, basically. But for most viewers, it essentially means GPS.
Right.
So basically, the mower is connected to several satellites. The mower needs about a 90-degree view of the sky. So it's designed for more open areas. So if you had
Right.
an area that had really thick tree canopies, like you can see in that
Right.
background on
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yep.
picture,
Mm-hmm.
there might be an area that the mower can't actually mow
Oh,
because it
interesting.
can't see the satellites. Now, obviously, the technology is improving all the time, and the mower can run for a certain amount of time without seeing satellites
Yep.
by driving back to its last known position. Um, but it also uses, we call it a reference station, a GPS enhancer. And what that does is that would sit up on top of, say, the stadium or that light pole in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And because satellites are always moving, we need a way to send correctional data to the mower.
Sure.
So
Right.
it'll send radio waves up to 500 meters, which is correctional data, which
Right.
basically helps the mower with its accuracy. Now, if you had an area that was larger than 500 meters, say a golf course,
Yep.
we can actually set up multiple reference stations. So you
Right.
have like master and slave reference stations. So you can boost
That's a
the
what's this
mower.
master and slave? It seems like a little bit Game of Thronesy.
Or
Anyways,
like daisy chaining them together, if you like.
okay. Some technical knowledge,
Mm, mm,
technical names for things, but yeah, someone's having fun that day at work. But what you're getting is you have multiple of these. They communicate to each other, and it allows you then
mm,
to do a longer distance. That's good because
mm,
I was thinking about this from a practical standpoint. Let's
mm,
retirement villages is what I've got in mind, right?
mm,
You've got an area where people want quiet mowing. You know, people are
mm.
whingy. You know, like at retirement villages. Yeah, they are people. Stop. You know,
Yeah.
haters get out of the comments. They are. They really they have opinions. And if you had a mower that was, you know, although these are very fast, they're not as fast
Mm,
as a 72-inch ride-on, or most ride-ons, in fact. So,
mm,
you know, if they're going to be mowing for a long time, they're going to be quiet. Great. But then if they've got to travel, you know, you might have it, say you got a 200 house complex and it has 7 lawns, and the total might only be, you know, 5, 7, 8,000 square meters, you know, 1,000
mm,
each or something like that. But it's got to travel 100 meters between one and the other, and it's got to travel this path, and it's got to do that path, and
mm.
all that kind of stuff. It can do that in theory if you set it up correctly.
Yeah, so it's obviously going to depend on the site, but you can have up to 20 different lawn areas per machine.
Mm-hmm.
And each of those lawn areas can be all cut at independent heights
Yep.
at different times. And
Yep.
the way you actually connect the lawn is via a transport path. So we can tell it to follow a path. So, say that mower there's
Yep. Yep.
mowed the football pitch, we could then tell it to follow a transport path across the athletics field
Yep.
to mow the other lawn. So yeah, you can do all that. Um, yeah, it's
Can't
just going to depend on the site.
can't stick a pole with a flag on it because Granny's she's a hoon. You know what I mean? And
Mm,
if she's not seeing this and it's on the side of the path, it might be in
yeah,
trouble. Is there something like
yeah,
that I can? I don't know if you have that problem at your other jobs.
yeah. We've had a few sites where we've put flags on top of the robotic mowers, so they
Hmm.
stand out a bit more.
Hmm.
So normally, like those suction cup ones with
Oh yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
flag that's maybe a meter up in the air works quite well. But generally, what we do is we mow outside normal hours where people are using the lawns, and that works quite well. And you can have several mowers connected to the one reference station. So if you had limitations on hours, you could actually, mow the different lawns with a few different robotic mowers.
Let's say, Andrew, that I've got we've got the sports field here that we've got here, and let's say I've
Yep.
got a contract to do that, and then just down the road,
Mhm.
now I couldn't drive this on public roads or anything, I'm assuming, but
No.
let's say I've got a contract where, say, I'm weekly at both sites, right?
Mm.
And let's say for 3 days it cuts this. Could I then pick it up myself, transport it to my second site, and leave it there for the next 3 days to cut it, and then bring it back and alternate between those two sites with one machine? I'm asking a bit much with that. Is that a possible solution for some people?
Well, look, if say you can see there's behind that athletics field, there's
Mm-hmm.
another soccer pitch. If there was a transport path that where we could get from that field to that other football field,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we could know that. In terms of taking it to a new site and mowing that, it it would be possible, but it's not really practical to do it. So generally, you leave them, you set up all your lawns, and you
Mm-hmm.
just leave them to mow those lawns. But say you had a contract and that finished up, and you wanted to move to another site, you can just delete the maps, move your reference station to the new site, and actually create your lawns again. So it's
Right.
very scalable and flexible, because you don't have that investment of the boundary wire in the ground.
Yes. And
Mm.
that's what I think the contractors are now interested in, right? Because when you had the
Mm.
boundary wire, it kind of tied you up. I can imagine. So here's the thing: if you want to buy a $55,000 ride on lawnmower, and I have a mower that's when new is in that price bracket, there's definitely
Yeah.
use for that, and people definitely use it. But if you're going to make your money back from it from a contractor's perspective, right? Well, I mean, first thing, people, is you got to consider that you're not paying an employee. So there is a very big difference there in pricing. But
Mm.
people might go, well, I need to cover my costs, and maybe I can do it. Like, let's say you had a massive site. Yeah, you can do it with a massive site. But maybe if you had two kind of bigger ones, that's where they might be thinking that maybe there's a smaller unit that doesn't cost so much. It's got all the same technology, so you can get two of them. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. These are the kind of thoughts that I know that contractors will think. They'll go, "Can I
Mm.
do this? Can I do this? Can I do that?"
Mm.
Now, here's the other thing as well. There's a few limitations that robot mowers have. Now, I've seen one of your Husqvarnas in action at Ben Sim's house. Ben being Lawn Tips on YouTube. About a year ago, I stayed with him. Actually, not quite a year ago, but yes. Anyways, I stayed with him in his house, and he had one of the Husqvarnas, not this model specifically, that
Mm.
was mowing. And one day we're doing some stuff, and he goes, "Oh, I've got to go look on the mower," because he got a notification on his app, right? And what had happened is a stick or a branch, probably a better word. It was probably
Mhm.
probably this thick or something like that. It was a sturdier branch, had fallen down, and the mower had kind of ridden into it, gone up, and gotten stuck a little bit, and he had to move it, right.
Yeah.
What Here's one of the things that would really frustrate me if I was had one of these on site. Now, this is a perfect oval, no trees around that oval, right? We're not going to have problems here. I totally understand that. But when you talk about schools, right? When I cut my school oval, I cut something, a juice box, a pen, a toy someone's left, a child
Mm.
if I'm not paying attention. That was a joke, people. That never happens. But things get left in the oval, sticks fall down, things like that. Is it going to be the
Mm.
case? Let's say I'm a contractor. I've booked out my week, and randomly I get a notification the mower is stuck, and I've got to now drive,
Mm.
let's say, half an hour just to unfix it. And if that happens all the time and blah blah, it could be frustrating.
Mm.
This specific model, because obviously it depends on the
Mm.
model. Like, some people won't care if it's at their
Mm.
house; they're there every day, blah blah. But this specific model, is that a problem that you've tried to solve with maybe the layout or something like that, right?
Yeah, well, obviously it's a much larger machine, so it's much less
Mm-hmm.
likely to get stuck on something. But we've got very sensitive ultrasonic sensors on the mower, and you can actually turn object avoidance on. So if a
Right.
larger stick falls down, it can actually detect that and go around it.
Nice.
So that's one, I guess, engineered. way. A lot of the sites where we've got these in, they'll actually instruct some of the team to go around and clear debris. And obviously, if it, for example, was at a school,
Yep,
they'd encourage the kids not to leave stuff on the lawn
of
to
course.
begin with.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of the newer residential models as well, we'll probably get into them a bit later, but they've actually got object detection by radar, which is more accurate again. So
So if you
you
want
can
to
probably,
bomb the Bismarck in World War
mm,
II, you can just take the radar off the. That's, I'm being silly. That's pretty cool.
yeah,
Like, can you imagine
mm,
talking to somebody from World War II and being like, that radar thing you've got in your submarines? We're going to have that on
mm,
robotic lawnmowers. Your great grandkids, that's what we're going to have when they grow up. That's cool. All right.
yeah,
So, but yeah, so there is technology to avoid that. How
mm,
how confident are you? Because you said if it's got a lot of trees, it can't really
mm.
drive around those trees anyway. Well, it
We
depends
can
how
create.
thick it is, right?
Well, yeah, it depends on how thick the canopy is. So if it's not a really thick canopy, yes, it will
Mm-hmm.
be able to operate under it. But if it's a really thick canopy, like a really big gum tree, or um, yeah, I'm trying to think of a tree with a thick
Yeah, sure,
canopy.
sure. Like a big
Yeah,
ficus or something like.
yeah, something like that. You'd create a stay out zone under it. And what you tend to find, big canopies like that, the grass doesn't really grow under it anyway. And a lot of people won't actually mow under them with a ride on anyway, because
All
there's a
right.
lot of sticks and roots and stuff that, could
Yes,
break
I
a
see what you mean.
spindle. Mm.
They kind of get sandy anyway. They get thin, patchy sandy. Best to sort of spray out the lawn, put some mulch there, some plants that actually grow in the shade. So if it's that
Yeah.
thick, I guess you would probably be able to, if somebody came to you and was like, this is my site, here's some photos, blah, 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 that you
Mm.
could probably, like, how quickly could you tell, yes, this will work, or no, that won't work?
Oh, very quickly. So we normally use a program like Near Maps,
Yep,
or Google Earth, and zoom in
yep.
on the property, and then normally one of the robotics specialists or one of the Husqvarna dealers
Mm-hmm.
would come out and actually evaluate the property and make sure it's suitable.
The school that I do, it's got trees around the perimeter of the oval, and
Mm,
the oval itself I cut quite low because it's
mm,
kind of a playing surface. It is a primary school, so
yeah,
it is young children. We're not trying to win the World Cup or anything, but it's you get the idea. It's you want to
mm,
cut that section lower, and then I cut the surrounds higher because the slightly higher lawn can handle more traffic, all
mm,
sorts of stuff, better in the shade. Can you set different heights for different zones with this, and it just automatically does it?
yeah. So you can have up to 20 different work areas.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you could have the sports field as one area or two areas broken up. And then the outer area could be an outer area at a different height. So it's quite common to do that. So one of the sites we've got this Ciora product at, they've got a cricket field which
Yep.
they like to mow at I think it was around 24 mil, and then they'll mow their rugby pitch at about 40 to 45,
Right.
because
Yeah.
they just like the extra height on the grass for rugby.
And what is the lowest this will go?
Okay, so there's two decks that you can choose for the machine.
Mm-hmm.
So, like we spoke about the drive units before, the 544 and the 546, there's
Yep.
a
Yep.
medium profile deck which will cut from 70 mil down to 20 mil.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a low profile deck which will allow you to cut from 60 down to 10 mil.
Well, 10 mil is very low and
Yeah.
that will get most people, like most playing surfaces. I've talked to a stadium manager who does, like Matt Oliver we're talking about here at Suncorp Stadium. He's cutting around the 25. I believe FIFA stipulated 25 mil for their soccer.
Mhm.
I believe most cricket guys, not that I asked Damien this when he was on the podcast, Damien Hoff at Adelaide Oval, for those who didn't know, but they're cutting around, from my understanding, around 10 for a fast outfield. That's a
Mm.
very high expectation for a local public area, though, because you can
Mm.
control during the cricket season. You can control a bit more of what's going on. I mean, maybe they're
Yeah.
going a little bit lower if they want it to be lightning fast. But so I guess what I'm getting at here is, whilst certain fields might want, literally still in the cut, and they may want it at a certain height, for the average
Mm.
punter or the average field, this has got the height range that you need. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And 60 is quite
Yeah.
tall too, right? Even if they're on your low cut, 60 is still quite high.
Yeah, that's right. So you probably find in a lot of those scenarios, Luke, that those lawns are only being cut once a week, if that.
Mm-hmm.
So they probably like to cut it a bit lower to give it time to grow. Whereas with the robotic mower, you can keep it at 30 mil all the time, or 40 mil, whatever height you like. So it's a totally different concept of mowing in a way.
There is a big difference between, like, literally Adelaide Oval and then a park
Mm.
2 kilometers from Adelaide. Like, the
Mm.
expectations and everything. It's just because I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, I do believe they cut the oval daily at Adelaide.
Yes.
Like, I
Yeah, I
mean,
was
but it's a
actually
stadium, so it's like, well, yeah. Yeah, you were going to say something?
yeah, I was there for the Parks and Leisure conference. They had an event there at Adelaide Oval, and they were mowing it when we were there. So I think that's on the money.
Parks and Leisure Conference. That sounds
Mm.
that sounds like we're just having a nap. Is that what we're doing? We're gonna go to the park, get out of the hammock.
Yeah,
Andrew's cooking some snags. That's the kind
that's
of
it.
conference I want to go to.
Yeah.
Well, mate. Okay, so a few more things on this. Steps.
Mm.
I couldn't do steps, surely, right? Like, you're gonna have to come up with some solution with that, right?
When you say steps,
I mean,
uh,
like, you've got like one section. You're talking about, you can create a path, right, to where it can go from one lawn to the next. If it's got some sort of steps, it surely can't. It's got to be a
oh,
ramp that's got to go up and down.
yeah, it can't go down steps or anything like that. Um, it's mainly designed for larger, flatter areas to this machine. It'll
Mm-hmm.
handle up to about 15 degrees. So really designed for sports fields and really large flat areas. Some of the smaller robotic mowers, of course, can handle steeper ramps or steeper lawns, but yeah, they definitely can't go over steps. Um,
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about this. I mean, we got so much to cover. We're like 40 minutes in, and we've talked about one mower.
yeah,
But there's, I guess, the concepts are across several of them. So it's
mm,
and people are going to be so fascinated by this as well. So I mean, it's
yeah,
just interesting. But I have a feeling that we talked about the shaded areas, and this can't really do that. But you do have other options that can do that, especially if it was wired. So you might find
yeah,
that, and the same with the slopes. And you might find that if you do have, like, I can think about university campuses or things like that I know off my head. You might not actually have the possibility to take it from one area to the other. You couldn't fit a ramp in. You know what I mean? Like, so they might need to.
mm,
Maybe you've only got a 400 square meter section, so you
yeah,
might get one of the cheaper models just to do that section. If you've got a really hilly section, you don't need to buy the $50,000 thing to do everything. Certain
yeah.
sites may need three or four, is what I'm trying to get at. But it's just
Yeah,
curious.
look, there's lots of different ways to work around that. You can actually create a secondary area,
Mm-hmm.
which is an area that's not connected with a transport path, and you could actually say it was a 200 square meter area. You could actually drop the mower in there and say mow, and it'll mow the area.
Right.
So
Cool.
you can do that as a workaround and carry it up the steps.
How much do they weigh?
Well, obviously, depending on the model,
But this big boy here.
it's about 72 kilos. So
Oh, so
it
yeah.
requires two people to lift it, but some obviously not really designed for secondary areas, but some of the smaller
Yeah.
commercial
Okay.
auto
Cool.
models you can
Yeah.
do that.
All right. Okay. I was going to talk about this later, but I want to talk about this
Mm.
now, right? And one of the limitations is with these mowers is they can't, at the moment, do any form of edging, right? Do you feel that that is a possibility, or do you, as in, because there's two things here. It may be a technological possibility, but then government may get involved or legislation may get involved because of exposed blades and things like that. Because if you're going to cut an edge, say, well, there's two types of edging. What you typically do with a line trimmer or a whippersnipper, where you're going right up against a wall, or you might have the
Mm,
vertical edge that's going down into the ground to define the lawn from a path. Both of
mm,
those, by definition, will need some kind of exposure on the blade, as in, like, the blade
mm,
has to be unprotected. Now, you could put a lot of casing around it, you could do this, but at some point, my feeling is I don't think the government's going to be too cool on that kind of stuff, even if
mm.
the technology is there. But you
Yeah.
would know some stuff that I don't. Just a little bit more waffling from me for a second. You look at these mowers, and we
Mm,
talked about just the distance between the blade
mm,
and that. It's highly unlikely that my 2-year-old is going to put their foot underneath that and get hit. But it's
mm,
almost, how do you do that with these other forms of edging? There's
mm.
just a risk there. So is it possible? Is it something that could happen in the future? Is there secret technology Husqvarna's working on that you can tell us about, but might get fired because it's that secret?
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's a very good point. I mean, the way I like to answer it is it's a robotic mower, not a robotic line trimmer, or edger. The EPOS technology machines, if the edge of the lawn is flat to say a
Mm-hmm.
road or pavers or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, they will actually perimeter mow. So they'll
Mm-hmm.
actually do 2 laps around the perimeter, which squares off the edge. But it's not going to do a defined edge like you would with, an
Yep.
edging tool or an atom edger. It's just not going to do that. But yeah, they're always looking at development ideas. So watch this space is all I can say.
So they're trying to do it, is what they're trying to work it out, because
No
I don't.
comment.
No comment. So we caught him. We know. So the next thing is, which is again back to being silly. Can you put a drone on this and fly it down instead of having? I mean, that would be scary. It'd be like, I mean, it'd be cool, scary. Do you know what I mean? Like, to be able to go, we have a mower, maybe this 72 kilos. Okay, maybe not that one. But you could, I can see a university or something like that with all the steps and this and that, whatever. You put a drone on top, it flies down the steps. It'd just be like, this would be epic. I feel like I was in the Jetsons if that was the case, you know?
Yeah, it's a very cool idea. I mean, we did have a concept video a couple of years ago where a drone comes down and drops smaller robotic mowers off on rooftops. Um, but yeah, it's something that could happen in the future, but not available at the moment.
Interesting. That would be cool.
Um,
I mean, I think
oh,
we would, to get to a point where the robot mower could do edging, this and that. I've said this on the podcast. Back to the edging is, my personal opinion is, because you've got this really interesting thing with the Tesla auto, what do they call it, auto drive, whatever it is, autopilot. That's the word I'm looking for. And you've got these technologies where they can kind of drive themselves, not
mm,
without a human being there. I think they're still in beta for the really, like, intense or really high end version of it. It can do highway cruising on its own and things like that. But then
mm,
there's this government side of it, which there's a few things like, how do you, who's responsible for insurance, who's at fault for a crash, how do you set the like, if the trolley ethical problem, does a Tesla crash into the one person or the three, do they, like, there's all this kind of, that's where I feel the limitation. Eventually technology will get there, right? Eventually you'll be able to cut within a quarter of a millimeter, and eventually, I don't know if it's next week or 55 years from now or 100 years or whatever it is, but I feel like they're the interesting problems where it's like, what if something does go wrong, and what if this happens, and who's responsible, and should we
mm,
even allow a technology like that? Like, that's the kind of stuff, the ethical stuff, that I think the
mm.
governments will really want an answer to, and maybe that will take longer than the technology. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, look, it's definitely an interesting area. I mean, if we bring it back to a robotic mower, they move across the ground a lot slower,
Mm-hmm.
so the risk to animals or people is very low.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got heaps of engineered safety in there. You've got ultrasonic sensors and bump sensors, so it's not like it's going to mow someone down. So they are very safe to be in public spaces. I actually have one out the front of my house as well, mowing,
Mm-hmm.
mow the medium strip with it. And, the worst thing that normally happens is occasionally a dog will bark at it. But it's very safe to be out in public spaces because of the speed. If you're looking at autonomous, ride-on products, yes, I agree that will take some time, particularly in public spaces because of the safety element of
Yeah.
a two-ton machine. Whereas robotic mowers available now and much safer um, to be used in public spaces.
What about collection?
Yeah.
So these guys will cut and they just drop. Now, for a lawn, a lot of people say that's really great. You're putting it back on, but there's other things: leaves, small sticks. In
Mm.
autumn, everything's dropping, especially in North America. So I'm sure Husqvarna is trying to think about something. Could you get an automatic like brush and then it empties itself somewhere, that picks up stuff? Is there stuff like that in the development pipeline?
No comment on that one, but that's a
Got
very,
him again. We got him
very
again.
interesting area. Look, I think there's a bit of merit with that, but the way a robotic mower is designed to work is it cuts so frequently, it's only taking 1 to 2 mil off the top of the grass. That falls through as natural fertilizer for the lawn, and you actually get a much thicker, lusher lawn. So, but I do get the need for picking up leaves and sticks and things. So I think it would be another product outside of a robotic mower to do it. But
Yep.
it's a very good idea. You should come work for Husqvarna.
I'll charge you 7 Zbox a minute. That's my recommendation. That's my what's it? The standard. Um,
Yeah.
with Okay, here's the other thing with these guys. I don't know if you're involved with any of this technology at all, but there are these robotic weeding zappers things, fire things that they're putting at farms, and I haven't seen them in person. I just see videos on the internet,
Mm,
and I think that's pretty cool.
mm,
Is there a possibility? Let's keep trying to push this. Like, what can you can you not talk about? Is there a possibility
mm.
to have it would probably have to be a separate unit for product application or for those kind of things where you're getting rid of weeds and you are that's a more finer turf care, not just
Yeah,
mowing.
yeah. So I reckon a lot of outdoor power equipment companies would be working on that sort of technology. So, you've obviously, with that Ciora product, you've got a drive deck and you've got an attachment, which is the cutting deck. So,
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the future it'll be possible to fit other attachments to the machine, but that could be a few years off.
Right. Can you fit like okay, this is just a silly question again, right? But like let's
Mm,
say in the future you could have your complete outdoor robot with all the attachments. So let's say we get the edging robot, or so the robot, this body part here, body part. See, the personifying them already, but this part of the equipment here, and then so he's got his and he's a he, by the way. I just decided it's a he. He's got his attachments in his shed, and good old Randy the robot goes into the shed and disattaches and gets on this product to pick up the leaves because it's definitely a brush and a catcher. I designed it already in my head, and Husqvarna's going to pay me royalties for that. And then he gets his weed zapper thing, and somehow doesn't set fire to the house, but controls them all. It's like, so is that the idea that we're heading to one day?
Oh, you never say never, but yeah. Look, I think there's a lot of merit in a concept like that.
All right. Well, send me my zinger boxes through to. Oh, I won't post my address on here, but it's probably in my email. You probably already have it. Anyway, so
Yeah.
looking at let's. I think I've exhausted this model. It only took us mid 50 minutes. Do you remember when you were
Yeah.
like, "How long will this take?" And I was like, "Well, it's funny. Some people are
Yeah.
like, how can we have a long form conversation about the product that you talk about every single day?" But once you get into it, it's like,
Mm.
to talk about these in detail, it takes a while. You've got a whole bunch of other products. Now, that is a top of the line. So a lot of this technology is kind of in some of these other ones, but not quite, right? I've gone right. For
Yeah.
those listening, I'm back on the website. We're back on now the cheapest products. $1,400 is the cheapest auto
Yeah.
mower you've got, right?
Yeah, so that's a new product, this Aspire R4. It comes
Mm-hmm.
with its own installation kit, and
Mm-hmm.
it's designed to buy out of a box, and you can basically set it up on your own lawn with an install kit. It does have some new technology in it, like it's got a higher IP rating, so you can wash it with a hose, with a garden hose, that is, not a pressure washer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's got Wi-Fi connectivity, which could be good for some customers as well.
So you can
So
watch
yeah, it's
Mr.
only,
Beast videos on it. You can chuck some
that's
YouTube,
it.
connect to my Chromecast. So
Yeah, but you can just obviously connect it to your home Wi-Fi
yeah.
network. So it's obviously Bluetooth connectivity as well. But if it was out of Bluetooth range and you had a Wi-Fi booster, you could still be connected to it.
Fascinating. We do not have enough time to talk about
Yeah,
you got 25 products, and we talked about two
yeah,
of them for 55 minutes. They're probably the most interesting ones. But
yeah.
looking through this range, okay, you've got people just go on the website. It's the Husqvarna.com
Mm.
/au, but just go, you can work it out. Go on Google. You guys are smart.
But
I
in
know
a
you can do it.
nutshell, basically, you move up in price. You're going to much larger lawn capacity
Yep.
with many more features. So there's robotic mowers designed for 400 square meters, 600 square meters. Then you jump to 1,000, and then 1,500, and then up to about 3,000. So there's lots of different models depending on the customer's needs. But we like to specify one that suits the budget and also their needs. I think, given we don't have a lot of time, probably the most interesting thing for the viewers will be this new Nero range.
Yep.
That
So I've
we
got that on the screen now. These ones here.
Yeah, so there's three models in that Nero range. There's a 320, which is
Yep.
designed for lawns up to 2,000 square meters or 2,200 square meters.
Yep.
Um, that comes with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity.
Yep.
Um, it can be installed as a wired auto mower. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, we've got a lawn that's got a lot of tree coverage, or tall buildings or
Yep.
something that block the satellite signals.
Mm-hmm.
You can fit a module kit onto it if you've got an open lawn, and it makes it wireless. So
So it's both.
it's both, yeah. So we've basically designed it. It can be used as a wired one or as a wireless by fitting a module kit to it.
For those listening, we're now talking around the $6,000 mark. So I guess that's a pretty good way. So the top of the line is tens of thousands. The cheaper end for residential is 1, 2, 3, maybe 4,000. In that kind of range. And then now when we're talking about, and this has got everything that's got the word or the acronym EPOS on it, EPOS, trademark
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah,
That is your wireless
Yeah, it
version.
stands for exact positioning operating system, but essentially wireless. So
Yep.
the Nero 320, if you buy it as a standalone wired solution, it's $3,999. But if
Right.
you buy if you buy it as an EPOS kit, you're
Yep.
basically adding just under $2,000 onto the cost to have it as a wireless machine.
So the EPOS upgrade's quite expensive.
Yeah, it is because RTK technology is quite expensive.
Right.
So,
But
um,
if you need it, you need it. And
yeah,
I feel as
and
well, like especially for people like if you're talking about 2,200 square meters, like if you're talking in a commercial setting, like I mean, and these are not really what you would consider commercial, right? Like these are not like I guess how do you even call what is commercial, what isn't commercial? It's kind of like a whole discussion of itself. But if you were going to mow a facility that had that much lawn and you put one of these in it, the cost
mm,
over a 3 or 4 year period would be significantly less than paying for a ride on lawnmower and
mm,
wages. So,
yeah, the
yeah,
operational cost is, on average 50% less overall. So payback period's very quick. But if
yeah,
you look at the main difference between a residential model and a commercial model, the commercial model doesn't have an LCD interface on it, so it doesn't have a screen where you
hmm
can put in PIN code and play with the machine. The commercial machines you can only connect to them via your phone and change settings on your phone. So they've got a higher level of security.
all
That's
right.
probably your main difference.
Now I'm going through here. You've got some
Mm.
all-wheel drive versions. Now, what maximum slope performance inside
Yeah,
installation 70%?
yeah. So that's
Like
equivalent.
that's like going up a wall.
Yeah, like up a very steep staircase.
That's
So yeah,
crazy.
yeah. I've sold quite a few of those actually into properties that are dangerous to mow with a self-propelled
True.
mower. Um, so yeah, they can handle very steep slopes.
Right. Well, that's makes sense, and obviously safety is you can't really put a cost on that. So if someone's putting themselves in
Mm.
danger, and again,
Yeah.
like they've got a lot of capacity, 3,500. It's around the $7,000
Mm,
mark. People go have a look,
mm, mm,
7.5 kind of thing. But again, like if you're talking about a mower that can, I don't think there
mm,
is any human mower that can mow that size. Unless you've seen the guy who has that tractor with the winch on the back and he pulls a mower. Like have you seen this one? He's got a normal lawnmower. Oh, it went super viral. So everyone's who's listening has
mm,
seen it, but I'll describe it for the three
mm,
people who haven't. There's a massive hill. Someone's got a tractor, and I think he's put a winch on the back, and he's just put a rope to this mower, and he just winches it up and down the hill as he drives his tractor. A very smart idea, but
mm,
still got to take it time. So this is kind of what this is
mm.
for, right?
Yeah, that Neuro range, obviously we touched on it before.
Mm-hmm.
It's got object avoidance by radar. It's got a much higher IP rating. It's got Wi-Fi connectivity as well across all the models.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those are some big benefits. And even with the wired mowers in that range, they actually create a virtual map of the area.
Mm-hmm.
So after you've finished your lawn, you can create virtual stay out zones. So you might have an area that pools with a lot of water. You can turn that zone on and off to keep the mower out of there when
Yep.
it's really wet.
Yep.
Or you might change a design on your lawn, and rather than having to cable it again, you could create a stay out zone in that area.
Yep.
Some pretty cool technology in that Nero range.
And that can adjust. Can that adjust its height as well for different areas?
It can if it's installed as a wireless machine with the EPOS module on it. So you can have up to 20 different areas and 20 different transport paths. And it's also got really good traction as well. It's got more weight over the rear wheels, and the actual front wheels I don't know if you've ever flipped an auto mower over, but they're very similar to a zero turn.
Yep.
So that front axle actually pivots on the nearer range, so it can
Right.
actually handle rougher lawns and rougher terrain.
There you go.
Hmm.
Now, I feel like we've pretty much exhausted the basics, at least,
Yep.
because it sounds like then the nearer is kind of this Ciora, which is the really fancy one we talked about people for a long time. It's kind of that made a little bit smaller, made a little bit more, affordable. Is that kind of where we're getting at? Most of the features are kind of there. There's differences in
Hmm.
runtime and the distance it can cover and blah, blah, blah. But is that kind of, because that sounds like that's what 3,200 square meters for some of them, 5,000 square meters, that's what we're getting at, right?
Hmm. Yep.
So if you don't need 75,000 square meters maximum. Now let's just talk about that. That's not cutting every day, right? You said that's cutting every 3 days. Is that
Every
correct?
third day. Yep. For that to get that capacity. But a lot of customers that choose robotic mowers too, they'll actually over specify the mower.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you had 200 square meter lawn out the front of your house, say the medium strip,
Yep.
and you wanted that mowed and it was a secondary area, you could actually select a larger mower that can mow that area in an hour, where,
Mm-hmm.
you know, on a third of a charge, whereas a smaller mower, you might have to drop into there multiple times. So, normally when we specify one in, we're asking a lot of questions about how they want to mow and use the mower.
Can you get your mower to write words in your lawn? Or like make lawn art? You know how you see you have multiple zones? Like, can I get like, okay, it's gonna write like, happy birthday or something like that, Merry Christmas on my lawn. I get my drone up and it's got perfect
Yeah,
italics font or something like that.
look, you could potentially do it on one of the EPOS machines by mowing at a higher height or a lower
That's what
height.
that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it'd have to be very big writing.
It'd be pretty cool
um,
if you could on like a school oval, some smart programmer gets the Mona Lisa cut from
yeah,
different lawn heights. That's you see. Okay, you also need to pay me for the marketing ideas that I come up with. All right. So that's. I think it's about 30,000 Zinger boxes. I think we're at now for. I've had another idea actually when you were
yeah.
talking about some of this stuff. So we did an interview with a company you may not have heard about called Monty Compost Company. It's an Australian invention. And what it is, it's like think about a big golf tee that you put in your compost pile and it
Hmm.
senses the gases coming out of it and it will tell you need to add a certain amount of this or a certain amount of this. And this is how you get your compost looking really good. It's like a personal trainer for this. And I was thinking like if you teamed up with them, right, and you had something that could collect organic matter, leaves, clippings, things like that. You could dump it into a compost pile, pair it with your scientific knowledge from your Monty, and then you can get like free compost without even doing anything. So again, for this idea, you need to go spend some money, purchase that as a business, and there you go. This would be epic. Like I'm now just thinking about like all the ways that we could solve all the world's problems because compost is a good hugely beneficial thing for the environment. And
Yeah.
anyways, just these are the ideas that come through my head. We've got to
Yeah,
talk. Yeah, you go.
I was just going to say, just on that, obviously, there's no direct emissions from a robotic mower and they're using far less energy. So, the price of petrol and diesel at the moment it's
Mm-hmm.
very expensive to run a larger mower. So there's a big saving on fuel. If you look at that larger Ciora machine,
Mm-hmm.
it would use up to about $350 electricity a year if it's mowing all the time.
Gee,
If you got a smaller robotic mower for your garden, it's probably going to be around the $30 to $70 mark for electricity for a year. So very efficient.
that's like. I mean, I don't think I was thinking about the labor cost when we're talking about the
Mm,
commercial stuff. You talk about
mm,
$55,000 ride on mower versus $55,000 auto mower. It's like I mean, most people are not buying a $55,000 auto mower or a ride-on lawnmower. But if you were to compare the two, it's kind of like, well, one, you've got to have a guy sitting on it too, and
Mm,
that's the cost. But then, yeah, you do have the running cost. And
mm.
now, what are the maintenance? You said 2 years, all the maintenance is covered, but there isn't, other than the blades, there isn't really much to do, is there?
Yeah, it's mainly changing blades and basic cleaning, and then we recommend once a year you take it to a Husqvarna dealer and get it a full service.
And what was the service actually involved, like greasing joints or?
Yeah, yeah, moving parts like that that might need greasing, changing breathers, changing seals,
Yep,
running it through the latest, updating the firmware, and just testing all the sensors and cutting
yep.
motors and wing motors essentially.
Making sure the googly eyes you stuck on the front for fun are centered. Looking
That's
good.
it. We've seen some funny ways people bling up their auto mowers, and we are actually going to look at getting some skins so people can customize them a little bit.
Oh, that's cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, because yeah, I mean, people, it's just fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wonder if all the crazy ideas are coming out. We got to keep talking about stuff because we got to get on to at some point. People are going to be like, how can you do a hot podcast with a Husqvarna and not talk about whippersnippers, line trimmers, mowers? And
Yeah.
people, I'm going to have to let you down at some point because we do not have enough time for every little piece of product, that you could possibly imagine from them. But obviously, being a Husqvarna, I'm just going to get up on the screen here. I'm going to try and find your professional battery equipment.
Yeah.
Here we go, 36 volts. I've got some questions about it. Let me put this on the screen here for you to see. And of course, it's got the auto mower there. But people, I've heard a lot of really great things from contractors. I've never actually held, not even held a Husqvarna battery bit of gear
Mm.
in my hand. But I do find that a lot of the market are already kind of talking about the Husqvarna range. You guys are fairly early into the market compared to some of these new ones that are coming out now.
Yeah.
I've got a few questions in the 20 or so minutes that we've got left, so I'm not going to be able to do as deep dive as what we did on the automower stuff. But
Mm.
what? Let's just overview this very quickly. Out of the battery range that you've got here, what are the stuff that you're finding is making you stand out from the competition, or making people confident at least to go down the Husqvarna route and not pick, fill in the blank brand?
Mm. Yeah. Well, look, I think Husqvarna is a brand that's built on innovation. We're over 330 years old. We're one of the first companies to get into battery
Mm-hmm.
technology for outdoor power equipment. So
Mm-hmm.
we've got a lot of experience in that area, and most of the range has actually been developed very closely working with contractors in mind. So um, for example, the T540 IXP, which is a top handle battery chainsaw,
Mm-hmm.
that's driven a lot of the technology for arborists. Yep, and just zoomed in on it there.
Yep.
Um, that was created in very close partnership with arborists overseas,
Mm-hmm.
and we got a lot of great feedback from that product. But I'd say some of the things that stand out are the fact we're continually improving the efficiency of the electric motors in there. Original ranges that came out might have had carbon brushes, but now the brushless motors, the efficiency of the motors has increased, so you're getting
Yep.
better power delivery. The batteries are more powerful than ever. We've got really good run times. Now, one of the things I always get asked about is voltage.
Yes.
Now,
I was about to ask that.
we, yeah, so there's a bit of a misconception that the higher the voltage is, the more power you'll actually get. It's actually the amp hours or watt hours that really determine real world
Mm-hmm.
performance.
Mm-hmm.
So we're basically a 36 volt system. That's the output you get on the battery, and yeah, we get really good watt hours out of the machines. So the operators that are running them get really good run times. So if your voltage goes too high, you're actually adding a lot of weight and extra heat into the machine.
Hmm.
So probably power to weight ratio is one of the biggest things I get told with our machines from operators, and that's from arborists and you know people using
Hmm.
line trim hedges are really happy with that performance we get on our batteries and the machines.
All right. So
Um,
what you're saying then is that the voltage can be a bit of a marketing thing. Then, like it, because everybody, this is the things. Well, not everybody. Most brands will say this is how, like they really advertise how many volts they've got
mm,
there, right? So,
yeah,
is it entirely irrelevant, or is it just mostly irrelevant? Is that what you're saying?
yeah. Look, I would say it's mostly irrelevant. It's almost like comparing voltage is almost like pressure in a way. It's not an accurate indicator on performance on a machine. So it's definitely amp hours. So you can have a much lower voltage machine, say around 36 volts, that can outperform a 72 volt machine on
Yeah.
performance because it's actually how those battery cells are configured to give you those amp hours. So at the end of the day, amp hours or watt hours is what I normally tell people to look at. Um, Probably another thing that I like to talk about with our battery tools is ergonomics. Now,
Yes.
might mean different things to different people, but it's actually really important for contractors. If you're using, a hand blower for three hours on a site, if the machine points upwards and not down where you're working, you've actually got to bend your wrist to control the blower and where it's blowing, and that actually can impact on your wrist. So
Yes.
ergonomics is a bit of a hidden thing, but I think it's actually the most important thing. It's how the tool's actually weighted. Like when you put the battery in it,
Yeah.
is it weighted well? Are you fighting the tool, or is it really well balanced? So that's probably another big thing for us in terms of the design of the machines.
It's an interesting thing, that concept, because with both of those things you talked about, like you're talking about
Mm,
non-spreadsheet comparable things, because people will go, and they do, and they should, right? They go on the website
mm,
and they'll go, Husqvarna, here's how many kilowatts your motor is, and here's what this is, and here's your blah blah, and then do all the maths, right? And then they
mm,
go this other brand. They go, here's this and here's that, blah blah blah, and work out to the dollar. And you should do that. Like I'm not saying people don't do that, but
mm,
one of the things that you might miss in a analysis of that is, did you put it in your hand and did you actually feel? Because the other thing is that, like, somebody might feel a Husqvarna tool and they
mm.
they go for a different competitor because for
Yeah,
whatever reason it just doesn't suit them. The same can happen the other way around. Maybe the stats were not the full picture. Somebody comes and holds a thing in their hand and go, I can use this for all day without flinching, and
yeah,
it's fine. I've found that with different bits of gear that I've used over the years, that
mm,
there's certain models, like I can remember some battery stuff where I remember the weight of a certain machine. I felt the handle was thicker and it was less comfortable. And it was the same handle replacement part as a different machine in that same brand. And it was just that the
mm.
feel, the weight of the machine was thicker. And I almost never used that specific petrol powered bit of gear because of how it felt in my hand.
Yeah. Yeah, probably another thing with our battery range, our dealers can actually connect their computers up to the batteries and the skins or equipment.
Yep.
They can actually work out how many cycles the batteries have done, what temperatures they've got up to. So there's a lot of data we can actually gather on
Yep.
performance,
Yep.
which I'm not sure other brands do that. Probably, obviously, being comfortable to use is really important, but I think safety is really important as well. So that's probably our machines have a lot of safety features built into them that maybe some don't have in the market.
Yep.
So a really good example would be to look at hedges. So battery hedges are really popular, and a lot of our handheld hedges have an extra safety guard on them. So if someone slips when they're using it, um,
Yep.
you know, not many people think a hedge is not, is a safe tool, but if your fingers get caught up in the blades
Oh my
when they're
goodness, no.
reciprocating, 4,000 reciprocations a minute, it can do a lot of damage. So that handheld hedger you just clicked
This one
on,
here.
yeah, that one there, you can see it's got an extra safety guard on the front of it. Yep, that darker bit piece there. Yep,
I might check
and
this photo.
yeah, that's a good one.
Yep.
And you've also got two levers on it, so you got to be holding onto that front loop handle,
Yep.
where there's a safety trigger there plus the rear trigger. So safety is really important. And most of our pro models have a really good IP rating. They're IPX4, and the batteries come in from the side, not at the top. So they're generally really good in that aspect. Yeah, they're still a mechanical machine at the end of the day, so they still do need maintenance, but we get really good feedback on the longevity of them as well.
I found that with the whole battery thing, like here's one of the things that's understated as well. So we talked about like, okay, how's it feel in your hands? But another thing is having a brand that, whether it's right or wrong, an older
Mm,
brand for whatever reason, people feel a little bit more comfortable with, right? And there's a few out there that, like yourself, were obviously doing many different products beforehand. And people
mm,
kind of, if they've used that petrol power thing,
mm.
okay, I'm interested in the battery from that brand. And it's not necessarily that the stats are what they're looking at or this or that. And look, I'm not saying that one's better than the other. I don't have anybody in
Mm.
mind. But some people just feel more comfortable working with a brand they've already worked with before because
Yeah.
of the warranty or replacement parts or just a trust they've built over time. I guess that's a lot of
Mm.
where Husqvarna and where they might be coming from, and a bit of an advantage, a trust advantage they might have over these brand new businesses coming into the market because there's quite a few of them.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good point. So, yeah, obviously, we've got a lot of experience with outdoor power equipment, and a lot of the safety and technology has come across from, petrol powered products. So, really good point there.
One thing we should ask as well, because I feel that, and I'm glad that we didn't need to spend so much time on this range, because what I feel
Mm,
is that people are not going to look at a Husqvarna chainsaw and go, "Can it cut?" It can cut. People are not
mm,
going to look at a hedge trimmer and be like, "Is it going to work?" But we know that your stuff is going to work.
mm,
I think one thing that would be really interesting that maybe people don't know is what is the warranty period like on these things? Because again, you talk about, you can compare everything and we can look at the stats and go this and that, whatever. But when something goes wrong and you're a contractor, that is when things are really expensive. That is when you really got to look into, you know,
mm,
that. So what is the warranty like? If something goes wrong, what's a little bit of the process? I know that's not specifically your area in the business, but
mm.
can you give us some insight on this?
Yeah, look, we have a 2-year commercial warranty on battery products. One thing I would say about warranty is Husqvarna looks after customers, especially contractors, because they're a very important part of our business. Um, if we have a product that fails under warranty, we really support those customers. We've got a lot of parts. The team goes out of their way to get, we might have, demo machines that can get the operator out of trouble while they're waiting for the repair. So
Yep.
they're really well looked after in that respect. Um, we don't get a lot of warranty issues, but it depends a lot on how the clients are looking after their products. So we
Yep.
have people that rave about the longevity of the machines, but they've got smaller teams and they really look after their equipment. And then you have the other end of the scale where it wouldn't matter if it was a petrol product or a battery product, the machines get an absolute flogging, so they don't tend to last as long.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, our technical services team that approves warranties is, very willing to work with customers. And I have seen a lot of examples where a machine's just out of warranty, but we'll actually help them out under goodwill to you know look after them.
Yeah, you always get suspicious then, wouldn't it? Like as a as a contractor, if it's like 2 years warranty and on 2 years and 14 days something breaks, and you're like, they designed that. That's planned obsolescence right there. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. Look, I
what?
don't hear a lot of that sort of stuff, which is good. But yeah, look, a lot of really happy customers with the battery range. Probably one of the most common pain points I guess get asked about is runtime. So that's probably
Of
something
course, yeah,
your
of course,
listeners
yeah.
would be really interested about. So certain tools are a lot more efficient with power usage. So a lot of contractors jumped on hedge trimmers because
Mm-hmm.
they're
Mm-hmm.
really efficient. Like a lot of contractors tell us they get all day out of a 5.2 amp hour battery for hedge trimming.
Mm-hmm.
But if you stick that in a blower, you'd be lucky to get an hour out of it.
Oh yeah, and that's
You
the thing.
know,
Like we've talked about
mm,
this on a few different episodes, so the audience is,
mm,
is really quite aware of that. But I think, I mean, the thing that people are looking at with a lot of stuff, the sound, the environmental stuff, the lack of vibration, there's all these benefits. So there is that weighing point. So, but getting to the technical stuff, what runtime can you expect from these blowers? I've got the blowers on the screen just by happenstance, but
mm,
what are you
yeah,
getting from that? Because people might not care so much because they want the other side of it, right? They don't mind
mm,
buying a few extra batteries, but some
mm,
people do.
yeah. Yeah, so you got a picture of a backpack blower, which has
Yep.
um, a large battery. It's a 31 amp hour battery. You get about 2 hours runtime on that battery,
Is that
which is
full
pretty good.
berries or is that kind of real world running on
That's
that?
kind of real world running. So
If I
yeah,
was to in a rage hold the trigger down on the most violent mode possible,
yeah, yeah.
what can you? And no one
You,
really does that, but like, yeah, what could you
yeah,
expect?
yeah, yeah. Look, we have had it happen before, where it's a competition to see how quick you can drain the battery tool
Mm-hmm.
compared to a petrol machine. If you hold the boost button down, which is giving you about an extra 20%
Yep.
power boost, you can run one of those down in an hour. So
Well, that's still good
um,
though. That's still
yeah,
like,
yeah. But one of the things with a blower, like you'll blow and
yep,
then you walk along to another job. When the machine's idle, it's not using fuel like a
of
petrol.
course.
So it's a very open ended question to how long they run for. But we do actually have a guideline on our website with charge times and run times on every machine.
I'm scrolling through all the stats as well, people. Now I'm gonna have to wrap this up because you've got a meeting in 3.5 minutes by the looks of it, and
Yeah.
I've got one more question that I've got. It's probably the
Mm.
best question of all. So I didn't warn you about this one.
Oh no.
I started. He's nervous now. What's your social security? No, that's joking. The question is: let's say there's a fire at every Husqvarna factory in the world. All right. Now you can
Yeah.
keep batteries because batteries are the equivalent of fuel. So you need it to run the tool, right? We're not getting rid of all the fuel in the world as well. So you've got your batteries.
Mm.
You have, for some magical reason, got the ability to save one specific tool in the entire Husqvarna lineup. Everything from ride-ons to battery to robotics, whatever. And you've got to make the decision. Which tool are you saving so that the people of the world can still buy it and still purchase it? It's essentially asking what is your best product, but it's asking in a different way. You can rebuild your factories. They'll come back eventually. For a year or so, though, this is the only thing Husqvarna can sell. What product would you sell? Or would you save, sorry?
In the battery
In
range.
the entire Husqvarna range. So you've got about 75 million things to choose from. Obviously, being the robotics guy, you might go
Yeah.
down that path, but what would you say for the users out there so they could have this one thing?
I'd probably say the robotics factory. I wouldn't want that to burn down, or I might not have a job. But
That's true.
the
Yeah. Let's say you
that
hide anyway. But yeah, you go.
oh, look, I think the battery chainsaw, the T540i XP, is an absolute ripper. It's got a 24 meter per second cut speed.
Yep.
We get so much good feedback about that machine. So if I had to pick a machine in the battery range, that'd be it to save.
I do like that you didn't pick robotics, just for the sake that it shows that it's a real. You really like it because like you got rid of the bias and you went for a chainsaw anyway. So
Yeah.
now, let me ask you a secondary one. Then, if you're going to get, let's just say it's just the robotics factory that's burning down, which robotic mower would you save?
The Ciora, because it's an absolute game
The
changer.
big boy, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
you
And you could
jump
sell one of
from
those and cover your cost for about a year, wouldn't you? You don't need to sell so many.
man. It is quite expensive to make. We manufacture them in the UK at Aycliffe.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, or pretty much most of the robotic mowers are all manufactured there, not far from Milton Keynes.
Which is where
Um,
Red Bull Racing is based out of.
exactly, so not far from there. But yeah, I'd probably save the Ciora because you've jumped basically from 200 meters square meters to 1800. So it's a game changer for me.
All right, mate. Well, I am going to have to kick you off because if my
Yeah.
clock is counting down right, you have 21 seconds left. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast, mate, and apologize to everybody else that you had that meeting at.
Yeah, that's all right. It was really nice to be a part of it. It's my first podcast, so I hope I did all right.
I think you did horrible. No one's going to get to you. No, I'm joking. If you like it, send us a message and tell Andy, and yes, we encourage him or something. And also tell
We've
them how many Zinger boxes they owe me for all these great ideas I've got. All right, guys. Thanks. Thanks for going on. We're going over time. See you later.
See ya. Bye.